Okay, so here we are for a very special episode of the ESG Sustainability Podcast. Absolutely, actually, a collaboration, as we're delighted to be joined by Geoff Matthews of SIM-PAC Live. They also host a fantastic podcast, the SIM-PAC Live podcast. So we're bringing our shows together. And the man on my right here, Ben Wood, is the head of branding and strategy from Telesca, who also joined us for today's show. And we're really here to unpack and discuss the compelling truth. But before we get into that, I think it's really important, as I always do, to find out how our guests found themselves working in ESG and sustainability, what their roots been in their careers to date. And I'm going to let Geoff jump in and do that first, because Geoff's had an incredible career spanning many different roles and worked with some incredible people. So Geoff, why don't you just paint the picture of who you are, where you've been, and how you find yourself sort of running SIM-PAC Live?
Yeah, it's quite an eclectic background and skills and things I've built up, but it probably started meaningfully in 1987. I was got a job as the personal private secretary to the then leader of the opposition in New Zealand Parliament. And 1990, I ran that election campaign. We became government. I was with the Prime Minister, right on with Jim Bolger, for the entire time he was Prime Minister through to 1997. Ran 3 successful election campaigns, but was at the sort of had this job that was, if you wanted to ring up and complain to the Prime Minister, you got me. So I spent my days not only defending government policy, but talking to New Zealanders, thousands of different people about their everyday lives from different walks of life. And I got to see a very different view of the world about it. No matter how you pushed out messages, it was how they were received. And that led me to, after my time in politics, I went back to university, got a postgraduate in marketing, specialised in branding. And it took me a little while to work out why branding in politics, but it's all about people's perception. And that's what I understood. I understood people more than that's what I built up in 10 years in politics. I understood people. And so that led me to a very successful career in branding and marketing, 5 New Zealand Marketing Awards, runner-up of Market a Year a couple of times. And then I started getting into business consultancy, because a lot of people would bring me in and say, "Oh, we really need help with our marketing. We need more customers." And I would look at their business and go, "If you've got any more customers, you would tip over tomorrow. You've got to sort your business out first." And so they said, "Oh, well, how do we do that?" And honestly, I started giving more business advice. And then I started commercializing new products. And I got a couple of tech companies away, and very successfully. And then that led me more onto a global stage of technology and new developments. And then I ended up getting offered something that in the sustainability field for that could help the modulation of aluminium smelters globally, and to help fit in with renewable energy grids. And I went and banged my head against that wall for about 5 years internationally, spoke all over the world, become one of the most published people in the world in demand side response of large industrial users of power, just by complete accident. And that led me to, really getting involved in sustainability. And then my kids, and I'll credit my son for giving me the push. He was 19 at the time, and he shocked me. He said he wasn't going to have kids. And I was like, "What?" And he said, "Well, there's no point bringing them into the world if the planet's just going to burn." And at the time, Australia was on fire, and California. And it was like a fair point, but I was completely shocked. I brought up a climate doomer in my own house, and I said to him, "Well, I was meant to be speaking at the first SIM in Europe, in Brussels, 2022." And I said, "Come up to Brussels with me. There's thousands of people doing stuff every day. There's incredible stuff happening, and you won't feel so, climate doomer about things," because that's what the kids see today. They just see that the place is stuffed, and he called me a baby boomer, but which I took offence at. But we ruined the planet, and for them, and they've been left with this mess. And so I took him up to Brussels, and we looked at stuff, and then that's what made me give the first run the first SIM-PAC down here. to
No,
try and get away from the blah, 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 and try and have people presenting solutions and showcasing the incredible tech, the incredible things that are happening all over the place. And I know I look through your guys' podcasts, and you're in the same vein as me. You're finding this stuff everywhere that you uncover. There's people doing really great stuff, and so that's sort of how that's my sort of career to date. But
yeah, it's
it's
awesome.
getting a little bit full circle. And one of the reasons we're talking about this podcast is that, and the compelling truth, which when I was talking to you guys, I threw out there, is that it's coming back to that initial branding. It's coming back to people's perceptions. And, and I think we should look and not lose sight of some of the things that we learned 20, 25, 30 years ago.
Definitely, and really, definitely keen to unpack, which we'll do. I find that I really enjoyed your comment about you were getting the phone calls for all the problems for the PM. So, not really a need for any opinion polls in New Zealand. Just a matter of how often your phone is ringing. Probably could sense some mood of a nation. Ben, yourself, you've obviously been at Telesca now as a head of branding and strategy, but I know you've sort of been on your own journey, your own pathway into the sustainability world, and very keen to hear that.
Definitely not as exciting as Geoff's.
Well, it's pretty hard to beat
I
that.
haven't worked with any prime ministers lately. I was born into an advertising family, so playing a lot of rugby and got a job in the mailroom. Subsequently got fired for being 18 and typically not ready for work. But my career came from the bottom up, and I think I went through every single department and ended up in a client lead, GM sort of strategy role. And I think the tipping point for me was my wife and I went for a holiday up to the islands on the Barrier Reef, and we went snorkeling, and over about the space of 2 hours in a couple of different spots, there was no coral. It was white, and I was really annoyed, and I was like, I've missed out. I didn't want this to happen just yet, and on the boat on the way back, I chatted to one of the guys, and he was telling us his life plan was to get out because there's not going to be anything to go and take people to see, and I think it really stopped me in my tracks. So. At that point in my life, I was doing a lot of camping and getting out in the environment, and I just saw all of that sort of vanishing before my eyes, and it pushed me to go into a space to do more. I found, similar to Geoff, that there was a group of people around me that just didn't know how bad it was, and the people that didn't know how to help, and so I pushed to get into this space. Obviously, I met you guys, which was a real masterstroke, and it's had a massive influence on my life and the way that I consume things and the way that I see things, and it's not altogether that positive. The confronting nature of people that don't recycle, and the way that the ocean temps are increasing, and coal production is increasing, and it's been a confronting journey, but I think to similar to Geoff, we're in a position now where the role of anyone in sustainability and largely ESG and environmental change is to raise the profile. So that's where I've at.
I think for me it's been awesome to see the way, like as you said, it's sort of a deep passion's been developed, but the way you've come into the team at Telesca and even in the office, we're really big as an organisation about walking the walk when it comes to this stuff, and making simple changes in the office and our daily lives that you can take home, and like you're without a doubt become the kind of like the North Star in the office, and running around picking bits of trash out of people's bins when they're not recycling. And it's been awesome to see how you've taken that sort of that seed of passion in your belly, and it's growing and blooming, and I see you like pushing it onto your friends and your family all the time. So it just shows how it can develop and grow.
My wife would be happy that it's not another expensive hobby, and that I've taken on environmental cause.
Right. the compelling truth, such a powerful phase. So I guess, Geoff, I'm going to hand over to you to let's establish that phase, the compelling truth, and why we're here to talk about it today, and then we can sort of look at the role it has to play in the ESG and sustainability sector as well.
Yeah, thanks. Look, I want to go back to the origins of ESG, which to me is really the 90s, but some people would say it goes back further into the 70s. But really, it was 1994. It was John Elkington wrote about the triple bottom line. And that was when things started to move. And I can remember vividly that the Prime Minister of New Zealand in the same year coming out, he blindsided us a bit. We had gone through this terrible time between 1990 and 93 of we couldn't balance the budget, and we did a lot of cuts to social welfare and everything. And the electorate was hurting, and they wanted to see a softer kind of face of government. And so Jim Bolger started coming out and talking about social capital. And he ran with it right through to the 96 election, which I ran that campaign, and we won like against all odds. And so that was my first early memories of triple bottom line. But recently, and even before, it's been sort of before I met you guys, it's been sort of at the back of my mind, but it's come to the forefront now. Thank you for helping me get there. Is that a lot of the language we see today around ESG is the same as what we saw around branding 25 years ago. But there's a couple of things missing, and I want to pick up on what's missing. And what am I talking about? The language? I'll quote you something. I'll actually read it so I don't get it wrong. So this is something from the Harvard Business Review, published it last month by Professor Alison Taylor. And she says, in a world of empty pledges, authenticity stands out, even when the truth is uncomfortable. Now, I want to read you from one of my MBA lectures that I was giving in branding back in 2001. And in the world of sameness, difference rules. And I think off the top of my memory, I was quoting Thomas Gadd, but don't hold me to that. So what it is that a lot of this language is the same. I'm seeing it regurgitated, but just talking about ESG. And so I want to go a bit deeper down this rabbit hole. And when I was lecturing in branding at MBA level, there was a notion. In fact, it was the commonplace that branding was a subset of marketing. You know, go down the corridor, turn right. And I used to flip that on its head, and I would say that marketing was a subset of branding, because branding was across the entire organization. Everything the organization did, everything it did, it affected the brand perception. And I know that this is where we guys intersect, because I know that you think ESG should be across the entire organization.
Yeah, absolutely. I think sustainability I think we probably need to separate ESG and sustainability. But for me, sustainability, it comes back to that thing. Whose responsibility is it? It's not just the chief sustainability officer's responsibility. It should be the responsibility of every single person in that organisation. And ultimately, we get to a point where I think you'll always have a chief sustainability officer, but it's not one person who's responsible for it. It's written in and sewn in and knitted into the organisation from top down to bottom.
Sorry.
No, I agree. I think with the evolution of ESG and the maturation of the industry, for want of a better term, ESG needs an anointed leader within a business. But if we've done our job right moving into the future, then ESG and sustainability needs to be a key KPI across all C-suite and all exec GM and GM and business leaders. If in 10 years the only presence of sustainability in a corporation is a guy in a corner office, we've failed horribly.
Agree. And also, as we're finding out very quickly, our supply chains are part of our ESG and our brand, what our supply chains do. And we know we can't get away with, stuff happening in our supply chains in Southeast Asia, and we're wanting to portray ourselves as the great, green answer to everything. So, yes, so this brings the fundamental question. I'd like to ask you a question, because who owns your brand? You guys got an idea on that one?
Who's the expert in this one?
I think, I mean, obviously the company owns and is in charge of the brand, but I think the brand is subservient to the consumer and the community. The reason for that brand existing is to, I mean, largely, most brands are in the business of behavioural change. So consider a product, buy a product, live your life differently, visit this location. In our space, I think brands are too worried about, consumer perception, and not, giving the community what it needs. But in terms of who owns it, obviously the board, the company, but brands are there as a servant to the consumer and the community.
Yeah. I'd even go a bit further and say that if you really want to understand the fundamentals of your brand, is you've got to acknowledge you don't own it. At best, you manage it. At best, you influence it. Who owns it? It's a collective memory of the brand community. It's what we all think out there about your brand. That's who owns it. And this means, and also, this is an uncomfortable place to be. You don't own your brand. You're not in charge of it. You can't control it. And especially in these days of social media, you can't control all the conversations that are happening about your brand. You can jump in the chat rooms and try if you like, but you can't control all of that messaging. And there's another important piece, and I mentioned it just earlier at the start, is that advertising and marketing is about pushing out messages. Branding is about how they're received. And you're not in control of that person's, you're not in their shoes. You don't know emotionally how they're going to receive that message, where they are in their life or whatever. And so you can't control that. You, as I said, you can best manage it. So if you go out on a limb and go, the brand community owns my brand, the same thing is going to message about ESG and sustainability. Is what here's a message. A report came out last week. It said that basically 80% of the waste in the oceans was down to 50 companies. Nestle, 3% of all the waste in the ocean, at least 3%, is one company, Nestle. 6% for Coke. And then you've got to look at that and you've got to put it in another context and go, well, Nestle sell 1 billion products a day. 1 billion products a day. So of course the waste in the ocean is going to come back to them. But also, what are they doing about it? They only need to make small changes to make a huge difference. And so, but those sort of messages come out. Those sort of stats get in people's heads, and that's becomes part of the perception. So
I think the reality of a brand that's in the market is the perception is a reality. So, I've worked on a number of campaigns for different brands where they've got the consumer insight and it's been executed poorly, and the perception is the antithesis of what they wanted. But the reality is that's the reality. So all of these brands that are doing these things, there is a perception that if the brand is evolving, then that's okay. But I think that the success previously in a very dashboard and an ROI driven world was always green ticks, green boxes across the page. So we're currently moving into a space with ESG and where businesses are going to be reporting red numbers, and there's a huge fear that we see with businesses that are nervous around being honest, and they're still in that 80s 90s brand methodology where we've just got to look like we're doing everything right. So
I think that comes from two reasons, right? The first being is a misunderstanding probably of how to communicate what we're doing in that space, and probably saying, to your point, Ben, guys, it's all right to not be perfect, but at least demonstrate that you're making improvements. So I think there's a real fear around that, but also, we look at ESG at the moment across sustainability. Greenwashing is still probably the most hotly discussed topic, right? And I think there's a genuine fear from a lot of organisations to put the wrong thing out or say the wrong thing. So they just don't say anything, which to me doesn't really help anyone, right?
Yeah. Look, and yes, I agree with your points. So it's a couple of things, because I want to get down to the compelling truth and where this comes in, because we're just starting to touch on it. Is that the language between branding and ESG should be the same. A strong ESG proposition or sustainability proposition can create brand value. Equally, it can destroy brand equity if it's a negative. And so, and ESG helps you understand your brand DNA, the essence of your brand as part of it. So that brings us to, look, there's some fundamentals of branding, but I want to talk about just three, because these are the ones I think we've lost sight of. Okay, one is that what is the essence of your brand, and we agree that ESG is now part of the essence of a brand. Two, a great brand will know what it will do and it will never do. And the last one is, what is the compelling truth? Now, the compelling truth is a thought process. I think its origins come from McCann Erickson in the 70s, maybe even the 60s. It used to be in their advertising briefs, and I used to work for McCann Erickson at one stage, and we used to have to write, what is the compelling truth? And it would be one of the hardest goddamn sentences that you'd ever write in your life for some of the firms that we work for. What is the compelling truth? And I think that's what we've lost sight of in ESG reporting. And I think ESG reporting is we don't want to make the same mistakes we did 20 years ago in branding. And what those were is that ESG, it's becoming part of auditing now, which is not down the corridor and turn right. It's down in the basement, turn left, or worse.
Yeah.
It could even be part of legal, and that's up, third to top floor, down the corridor, turn right. But either one of those options are not across the business. And also, we're getting into the world of check boxes and data, and then we hand that off to the marketing team, who then try and create some good news around something. And then that goes to the legal team, and we're seeing more and more companies get in trouble with pushing statements out there and then it coming to bite them in a couple of years or something. We know that they were marginal calls at the time to say, and it will eventually come back and bite them. So if you take it back and say, what is the compelling truth? And to me, what a brand will do and never do. If you stand there and say, we would never employ modern slavery in our supply chain, then what is the compelling truth? Probably you've got no transparency over a good portion of that supply chain. And you may only have transparency over 30, 40%. And so there might be 60, 70% you don't have transparency over. You need to come out and say that. You need to say that we haven't got transparency. We don't know, but we're going to find out. And if our supply chains can't give us that, we're going to shift supply chains, because that's what you've got to do. And this thing about, before you make any statements, before you come out with these, ESG, multi-page documents, what is the compelling truth? That's really what I'm saying. We should not lose sight of it.
Yeah, I think two things on that. One, I think where we've gone wrong is that we've forgotten to define what success looks like. ESG is especially different because it's a more esoteric subject, and people haven't quite got their head around the fact that there's an economic benefit in fast adoption of ESG and sustainability. So I think to your point, it has erred on the side of audit because that's where it neatly fits, and you're right that the information flow is going in the wrong direction. Audit's finding something that we're doing well, and they're passing it on down the line to marketing, and marketing are doing a campaign about it. That's the failure is it's not integrated across the business. So if it sits in audit, it'll just go the way of CSR and peter out to nothing. The branding thing is an interesting question, and again, it comes down to really how comfortable are brands with being vulnerable. How comfortable are they with the compelling truth? Consumers understand that we're all on a journey. I think the downside of the globe and this slow take up to save horrific climate outcomes is that it really is on a lot of people's radar. So I think brands have permission to be in market saying we're trying to define success, but we know that we're taking little steps every day. We're not there yet, and we're not sure when we'll get there, but we are trying. Rather than the typical approach, which is polished and wrapped up in a box with a bow, because I think the consumer insight, which really is the compelling truth and the thing that should drive all of this, is that we all need to do more. And I think if businesses are comfortable with the fact that there is no, every campaign I've ever run, there's always been a success metric. There's always been an ROI or a consumer behaviour that we've been looking to change. There isn't a finish line with sustainability and ESG. It is a constant. If we want to be living in this world with a relatively normal existence, this has to be an everyday, ongoing, constantly evolving section of our life, of our corporate life. Because if it isn't, then it won't work.
I think. Yes. On you go, Geoff.
Well, I was going to say that one of the things also is that when it comes to what we could do today, that there's often really easy, cheap wins out there. In fact, most of them are profitable. Not only cheap, they're profitable wins. They will make you money. And then there's stuff that's going to be really hard, and maybe stuff that we haven't even invented the solutions yet. They're not there. Like, if you're looking at decarbonising air travel, long haul air travel and stuff like this, we don't know where that's going. But what can we do today? And a lot of people, because the picture's painted sometimes so big and insurmountable, it's like easy to point, we can't go there. We can't go 100% there, so we're not going to try starting. And the thing is there's stuff you can do every day that's probably going to actually save you money. And energy modulation is one of the easiest things. Is learning how to use solar power during the day and shifting your demand so you're not in peak periods. It's just one of the everyone can do it. And so we've got to start. And this is why the compelling truth comes out again. Is what are you doing today? What's the compelling truth? Are you sitting there waiting for the whole world to change and industry to come up with a solution, and then you can be the last person on board to implement it? Or are you actually doing something today? And what are you doing?
I think, so put it to you guys as, people are heavily involved in brand, right? Are we actually now at a time of great opportunity? And I say that because the way I look at it, if you take ESG, Vijay's packed his bags and he's moved in with the finance department, right? So suddenly Vijay's taken care of, it's being audited, it's being reported, and yes, there'll be elements of that reporting and a sustainability report and branding, but we've probably been previously where a sustainability report has all been emissions, scope 1, 2, and 3, data, the governance side, right? With that being taken care of, or say, taken care of under the remit of finance, the E and the S are sort of rightly going to move in with sustainability again. Is now the time actually for the opportunity for branding, for branding professionals, branding leaders, organizers say, okay, well, listen, now is the time to go and tell the compelling truth, because we're not just about governance anymore. We want to make a difference. And you look at the likes of Patagonia and Intrepid Travel, some examples. Are we at a point of great opportunity to grab the compelling truth now and be honest and take it out and give examples and give stories? And I always take the example of Marnie Godding, who owns Elk, the fashion brand down in sustainable fashion brand down in Victoria, because 10, 15 years ago they went around their factories in Southeast Asia, and what they found was unacceptable working conditions for their supply chain. The difference was hundreds of other organisations had been to those factories, had done nothing, but they said, actually, do you know what? We're not going to have this, and we'll put our head above a parapet and we'll make change. So I feel like we're at a time of great opportunity.
I agree. I think brands have got to be, again, they've got to be comfortable with the uncomfortable. They've got to be willing to tell the compelling truth to their consumers, and there's upside, absolutely, but there's also inherent risk. But it is hard. Like, you look at what Apple did at WWDC last year. They launched a massive, beautiful, minutes long commercial about the Mother Nature one, about how awesome they were doing. Like, having been in that industry, like you've got an idea of what it costs to produce, right? And the things that would have gone into it. And I've no doubt that they would have carbon offset. But is that meaningful brand articulation of what they're doing? My dad told me once, don't tell me a joke, don't tell me you're funny, tell me a joke. And then you look at a business like Apple that have spent Lord knows how much money and effort creating a minutes long ad to tell people that they're doing better. Are they doing enough?
But then does that need to be driven by consumers?
I think
consumers have to be questioning more, demanding more, asking for more from the brands.
Well, this is this whole
they buy from
checkbox ESG topic that Geoff has raised around brands of we've got to be more aware. We've got to be seen to be doing, and we are doing, and they are, but we've got to now tell people, and I think we are losing sight of branding at its core, which is responding to the consumer need. And sometimes the consumers don't know what that need is. You look back to when Woolworths pulled plastic bags out of the market. They didn't waiver. They rode it out. Coles went back. And if you walk into a supermarket with single-use plastic bags now, you get stared at. But the reality is, and this is, and it goes back to that: who owns the brand? The brand's responsibility is to deliver against the consumer need. The tricky thing is sometimes the consumer doesn't know what they need because they haven't seen it.
And sometimes it's going to be regulated. See, in New Zealand, we just dealt with plastic bags. We just regulated them out. Was gone. Next week, there's no plastic bags. I think it was about that brief. It wasn't like 2 months. They didn't let anyone get any head of steam up to protest. It was like a week. We did plastic straws the same. We just they're going to be banned from next week. And we heard about it for about 5 days, and then everyone got over it, and everyone realised they didn't need plastic straws anymore. It was just, and most of them, by the way, the straws were easy because it was kids, and the kids all learnt at school that the plastic straws were, the turtles and things and the dolphins and stuff. So the kids were like on board. Boom.
This is the duality of that, though, right? In the Australian market, similar scenario in Queensland, banned plastic straws. I was working on a project for the Department of Environment and Science at the time. We got a whole lot of guys in for a focus group. 50-50 split. Don't you dare take my straws away. I've got $200 worth of straws in boxes out the back. And the other half was, yeah, okay, I get it. And the language in the room was, there will come a point in time, guys, where you can't afford to have plastic straws on the bench because people will come in and go, oh, sorry, that's not my jam. So there is upside to adaptation, and I think we're probably not doing a great job on highlighting what that upside is, because I think businesses are petrified about giving no more single-use takeaway containers. No, but that's my convenience. But the reality is that there is upside, because if businesses adapt quickly, consumers are drawn to that.
Yeah, and look, consumers like it's one of the things. Lunch, you go and buy, and I get to the point now I turn down. I look at the plastic containers and walk away. Because you go and have lunch, it lasts 5 minutes, take away Chinese or something, that plastic container is going to be in the environment 150 to 500 years. You know, if you want to go to kids, and I say this to my kids, their lasting legacy on this planet, long after they're dead, is in 500 years' time, their disposable nappy will still be on the planet, in the environment. And you know, when you hear stories like that, it makes the consumer rethink again. But I just want to come back to one thing, because when I say things that there are easy wins and aren't profitable, it's good to give examples just so people can understand what you mean. And I know a guy who's actually an accountant for a company. He went into this company and they were dealing with a lot of packaging coming in and out. And he saw that they were sending a truck every day of the week to the rubbish. So they were paying a fossil fuel truck to come and take their rubbish away every day. So the accountant went down and bought them a compactor, and they started compacting stuff, and they went from 5 days a week to 1 day a week. So they saved 4 trucks coming, you know, burning fossil fuels to on-site to take it away. He saved, I think it was about 110 grand a year just by buying them a garbage compactor. And then the guys down on who were doing that got into it, and they started doing aluminium cans, and then they started doing, you know, the cardboard, and then they wanted another one. And all of a sudden, you know, there's a whole revenue stream that wasn't there. And it saved them money. And those are the things, those easy wins are what we need to be, all of us trying to do. And all of us in the industry of giving advice need to be going and looking at these things, because some of the other things are going to be much harder. And so let's do what we're possible now. It saves a huge amount of CO2.
But I guess a lot of that comes back to this, right? Ultimately storytelling, right? So the example you use there, did that organization go and say, hey, look, we found a solution, we're doing this, it's saving us money, and sort of make some positive noise, tell the truth about it, so other companies can go in and say, hey, we should be doing that, and I see the value. And then, you know, because I sort of constantly drive this message in the space of collaboration and innovation. You need innovators, and you need people to share what we're doing so others can take hold of it. And I guess that comes back to this brand and branding exercise and telling the truth of what you're doing. Because if you don't do that, then how do other people learn and benefit?
I mean, you got to look at brands like Who Gives a Crap. You know, became aware that there were businesses using, making less than ideal concoctions to make bamboo toilet paper that just wasn't environmentally friendly, and effectively ripping off their brand. They shared the recipe. They put it out into the market because they care more about the progression of climate targets than they do about their bottom line. Now, at the end of the day, they're a business as well, profit, not for profit, whatever it is. But I think, you know, this idea of doing it on your own is going to become unsustainable. Ironically, the collaboration point of view is key to success. You know, sharing data on, you know, leaner burning gases, biofuels. Let the big guys do. You know, I know that Airbus are working on heavily on.
But who would dare be willing to admit that they burn the fuel? This is the myth, right? We're saying, like, it's right to say you're burning that fuel, but tell us how you're reducing it, what you're doing.
But I think
at the minute everyone's just like, let's just not say we're doing it.
There's a level of uncomfortableness around telling the truth, and I think that, you know, to Geoff's point, that's got to be the headline. The body copy is, but we're going to fix it. You know, and I think on the smaller scale, you know, you got businesses like Containers for Change that will come to your business and take away your recyclables, and they'll give you money for it. Yeah. And it seems ridiculous that businesses aren't doing this, and that it's just going into landfill and it's costing them more to get the garbage picked up.
I think that ties back. Geoff, I wanted to pick up on a really interesting comment you made before about you don't own your brand, and I sort of, you know, sitting here as a co-founder of a business, and we're big in brand, as you know, but like, when you said that, I was sort of like you said, it's an uncomfortable realization of, right, we don't actually own our brand. How many organizations or business leaders or founders do you think are actually aware of that statement and understand that? And then how much easier does it become once you've understood that to be able to tell the compelling truth and brand yourself more effectively and correctly in this space?
Look, my experience is that the small, innovative entrepreneurs that understand their brand and are closer to their brand are far more intimately than the big companies. I mean, you can't. I mean, go to the CEO of Woodside and say who owns this brand, and then go to his investor meetings and ask the same question. They're starting to find out. Coke is quite an interesting because its brand on its books is the most valuable asset in the world. Because Coke essentially don't own factories, they own a brand. So, but they understand their brand equity. I think some of them do deeply, and some of them don't, and some of them are arrogant about it. And the ones who are arrogant about it are, and let's just go to I'll just jump because I want to say there's leadership. I said about sort of the ones that are entrepreneurs and are leading. There's a lot of talk I've seen in ESG about staying in the pack. Don't put your head above the parapet. That's there's a term for it. It's called green crowding. As you stay with the crowd.
Yeah, close enough.
And don't show leadership. So, and companies like the big ones, Nestle and Coke, are they leading, or are they in the pack, or are they just doing enough? Those are the questions that we as consumers need to be asking them. Are they leading? Are they doing more than what they should do? Because they're the big ones. As I said, if you can move Nestle packaging, just a little bit, it's a massive. And I think one of you guys told me that you bought a Mars bar recently and it was in paper packaging.
That would have been Dan. I don't eat Mars bars.
No, I wasn't on a diet.
No, that was me. Yeah, no, but you're spot on.
Yeah.
So does that mean? It's a really interesting point, Geoff. Does that mean? So you use Woodside, right? Great example. They've obviously had a bit of a shareholder revolt against their their sustainability targets and what their emissions targets, right? And it's probably going to cost some senior people their jobs. So does that mean we need to see the sort of, I want to say like the rise of the revolution, but much more pressure coming from shareholders and organisations when they're pushing these reports out and actually challenging, like, because Woodside have ultimately been seriously challenged, right? And even in look at Scotland, my home country, they've just lost the First Minister because ultimately he had a coalition with the Green Party and he reneged on emissions, and he resigned a week later.
Do you know what the reality is of all of this? And it's to Geoff's point earlier. And entrepreneurs succeed because they are answering a consumer need, right? They are closer to the coalface. They have more insight. That's the disconnect with these bigger businesses. They are so big sometimes that you can't see the forest for the trees. That they have lost connection with real consumer sentiment. They've lost connection with the direction that they're trying to provide a solution for. They're just back on creating coal power. Whereas the market is like, hang on a sec, we'd really like you guys to consider, are there alternates? But they don't have that. They're not able to be as nimble. So it isn't as easy, in a board-driven business with lots of shareholders and you can't just stop tomorrow, as Atlassian's owner tried to do with AGL. That just doesn't happen in this market. But you can make small changes, and I think to Geoff's point, small things lead into bigger things, but that has got to be consumer driven.
And when I was a full-time branding consultant, one of the things, if I take on a new project, I would go and do some market research, and I would tell the CEO of the company, I'm going to look for the compelling truth here. And the CEO would tell me what they thought their brand was. And I'd go out and research it, and it was you could just almost, it was diametrically opposite. And
Yeah.
and they would come back shocked. Shocked. And so I'll give you an example. One of them was a big accounting firm, and I interviewed their clients, and I interviewed clients that had left them, and basically their clients thought they sucked. I mean, really. In fact, the report was so bad it led to a breakup of the partnership, and the managing director left, and actually because he wanted to change the brand and his partners didn't, and he commissioned it, and he left and actually employed me to brand his new company.
Good
And
on him.
so the compelling truth cuts a long way. And as I said, it's a question every department should be asking. It's not just a branding department. Is what is the compelling truth about your supply chain? What is the compelling truth about how you treat your workers? What is the compelling truth about your brand perception out there? And one of the things, just going to entrepreneurs, the closer to the consumer is easier to understand. So, I think you guys would understand your brand, because you're close to it. There's not a whole chain of middle management. And you can imagine these big companies commissioning some in-house research and then them hiding the stuff they don't like and making the stats speak to stuff. Where if, I would come in and I'd say, you're going to get it, warts and all. You want to know, you want to go forward. This is what you're going to find out.
And I think, never be afraid of failure. Failure is as powerful as success. You find out what doesn't work. Sometimes that's better than knowing what does. But I do think, we need to, empower consumers with small things that they can do, and whether that's brand preference over a brand stance on ESG, or whether it's petitioning change or buying a different product, then that's what it is. But these businesses need to be braver, and I think they need to embrace the fact that there's going to be a rocky road, but get in front of it. You mentioned that green huddling and not wanting to stand out. I just recently did a greenwashing course with the United Nations Global Compact in Australia, and the examples, a lot of the examples, not all, but a lot of the examples they showed about businesses greenwashing were guys that had just got it wrong. It wasn't malicious. It wasn't trying to dissuade people from looking any further. They just didn't quite realise that it went deeper than the one thing they were reporting on.
Yeah. Look, there's examples of people getting it wrong. I listened to somebody about fleece shirts made out of recycled plastic bottles, and what they said was, well, what they've done is taken something that was recyclable and made something non-recyclable out of it. And it never occurred to me in that way. And so those sorts of things, you get trapped. You think you're doing something for good, and it doesn't. I think we can now recycle those fibres, which is good, but the technology wasn't there a few years ago. So the other thing we've got to understand is no one's perfect. There's no such thing as circularity in anything. Maybe subsistence farming, but there's no there's no circularity, and we've got to modify our language. Now, I know you're involved in Containers for Change, and I've been involved in the aluminium production on a global scale for a while. For too long, maybe. But I moved to Australia a year ago, and it shocked me to the core when I was talking about the greening of aluminium, and I was giving an online speech to a conference overseas, and I googled how much aluminium was recycled in Australia. And it shocked me to the core. And I know when I ask Australians, they don't know the answer. So Australians currently, let's just talk aluminium cans because it's something we can relate to. We use in Australia 6 billion aluminium cans a year. Do you know how many are recycled in Australia?
Probably about less than a billion. No, a billion?
Nah, not a chance.
It's half a million?
I think it's 237 million. and
Yeah.
it's into remelt in Gladstone, which runs off a fossil fuel power station. So the containers for change. So as a consumer, we drink aluminium. I was part of this for a long time. I would give speeches overseas and say aluminium is the most recyclable product on the face of the earth. It only uses 5% of the energy to recycle as it did to make it. Once it's made, infinitely recyclable. And so we should be making everything out of aluminium. But then it's our behaviour. So we now put this aluminium cans in a fossil fuel ship, and we send it to South Korea, Indonesia, predominantly, a little bit in the US, but it's predominantly going there. And they use fossil fuels to recycle it. Now, if you want to know how far we're away from circularity in that chain, in June last year, we made the first batch of recycled aluminium from green hydrogen. They used to burn to reheat it. So in a trial, in a test facility in Spain, it was done by the Norwegian company, Norsk Hydro. So we made enough in once to make a few cell phones out of recycled aluminium. We've got 26 years to 2050. We've got to be recycling hundreds of millions of tons, and we've made one batch. All the rest of it gets recycled using fossil fuels, and so we've got it. So saying aluminium is the most recyclable product on the planet is incorrect. We need to. The compelling truth is aluminium has the potential to be the most recyclable product on the planet, and so we've got. And if we face that, then we will face the solutions. Now, green hydrogen is an expensive route to go. So what we can do instead is, and I looked into this yesterday, in fact, is if we could take methane from municipal dumps. At the moment, I'm here in Toowoomba, and the LGI have a facility here that they're making power from methane from the municipal dump here. We could be using that methane to remelt aluminium cans and recycle. And it actually may take legislation. We may just have to come and ban the export of it. And just like we did lead acid batteries. If we ban the export of it tomorrow, there's 100,000 tons of aluminium. There's $2,000 a ton. Just think about that. We send offshore 100,000 tons at $2,000 a ton offshore to someone else when we could be recycling it here.
It does need to form part of a broader reset in terms of sustainability planning as well, though. So those smelters need to be next to the municipal dump so that we're not trucking the methane. There's a broader conversation that recycling and transporting or utilizing coal-fired power, whilst not ideal, is the only option open to us, and I think it's better than leaving it in landfill. But the reality is, moving forward as technology evolves, we just need to make sure that those planning levers are pulled so that there is space around the right areas for that to happen. So Gladstone, is laden with land, but it's also a hell of a long way from any of the CBDs or the metropolises where the major consumption's occurring, right? So it is a reset in terms of how state governments, local area governments, zone areas and where that funding goes. So, there is a broader question of, at the moment they're doing what they can to deliver what they can, and yes, that is always going to, for the foreseeable future, involve fossil fuel.
Sorry, and this was the point. I think I got off track and got excited about talking about aluminium recycling, but the point is no one's perfect, and we've just got to acknowledge that. But it shouldn't dissuade us from making a start today. And like you said,
Agree.
The collection of those cans is the number one place you start before you can support an onshore recycling. And then you support an onshore recycling, and then you decarbonise the onshore recycling. And so I think that the Containers for Change is a great thing, and it's part of this process. But we shouldn't make sure we understand the compelling truth about this is that where we're going is the ultimate goal is to recycle all those aluminium cans. There's one company, it's Guinness in the UK. By the way, the UK export 15 billion aluminium cans they use a year, 15 billion, and they recycle none onshore. So Guinness is working on to have a recycling facility that they're going to plan a 60-day turnaround from going out in beer to re-getting the can for it to going back out as beer again, 60 days. 4.5 billion cans is what they're aiming for out of their production. That should be celebrated.
I think it's really interesting, Geoff, and you speak again about the compelling truth, and you use the aluminium example. And I think probably a good question to maybe sort of bring this to a bit of close on to both of you, and I'll put it to Geoff and to yourself, Ben. So, we established that the compelling truth is really key, and we need the organisations to start communicating a compelling truth. But I guess the question for both of you is, who drives that? Is it driven by purely consumers? Does it need to be driven by internal leadership, or is it a combination of both?
I think it's a combination of both. I think it's a push and a pull. Consumers have got to send a message with their wallet and with the habits, and I think that will give brands the impetus to push that change. But I also think there's an opportunity for brands to take a leadership position. There's a lot of free space at the top of the tree where brands, if they're brave enough, can capitalise from a market share and a financial point of view on being brave, on telling people that they're not there yet, but they're on the journey.
Yeah, look, I think it's easier if it starts from the top. If the CEO of a company is invested in this, then it's going to be easier. And it's going to be less painful for everyone involved in the chain, because I'm sure that there's people inside, organisations that want to look at the compelling truth and want to do this. I'm sure that the customers are going to feel uncomfortable too, looking at their own behaviour. What's the compelling truth about your own behaviour? Ben decided he looked at his own stuff at home, and I do, and stuff and packaging. And like I said, I won't. The most temporary thing in the world is eating lunch out of something and then it lasting 500 years in the environment. I just can't do that anymore. So if we started, it makes it easier if a CEO is invested, and it makes it much more difficult if they're not. Eventually, and some of these CEOs turn over a lot now too. You see them come in and they go on in 18 months and in 2 years, and that worries me as well, that we're not getting continuity as well. But in terms of the brand community and the consumer, is yes, consumers need to drive what they want harder. They need to ask for it more, because a lot of the time you'll go to a company and you say, "Oh, why don't you stop wrapping this in plastic and put it into cardboard?" And that's all. No one's ever asked us.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So, gents, for anyone listening who's and this is sort of hit a nerve with him or perked up ears, where can people find you, Geoff and Ben, if they want some advice about how to tell the compelling truth, and where's best to find you guys?
I'm on Twitter at Ben Woody and LinkedIn, Ben Wood, or contact me through the Telesca website.
Geoff?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm Geoff at sim-pac.com, and I've been lovely to hear from you. Connect up to.
Mate, awesome. And before I guess we say bye, Geoff, what's the latest on the next SIM-PAC event? Where is it? What are the dates? How can people get involved?
It's going to be in South Australia. It's on 23rd and 24th of September. It's going to be at Mawson Lakes, and it's going to be co-hosted by Tindo Solar, which is
awesome.
Australia's only manufacturer of solar panels. And it's going to be a select event. It's going to be 30 speakers and only 50 attendees, invite only. So you'd have to get on. You have to get onto LinkedIn and if you want an invitation and send me a message.
We'll have to do a live pod from down there and get everyone's point of view.
Yeah, that'd be epic.
Yeah, no, I think you guys would be. I think you could do some really amazing content down there. It'd be great to have you down. Yeah.
Also, gents, this has been awesome doing our first collab. So thanks, Geoff, for suggesting it. It's been so much fun. Ben, great to have your inputs as well.
Thanks.
And I don't know, I feel like we've only just scratched the surface here, and we probably need to come back and do a part 2 in this one, because we've only probably just scratched the surface, and a lot more to unpack. So, gents, thank you so much both of you for making the time and effort to jump on.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Cheers.